Okay, so first, my apologies on the last video for part one. I didn't mean for you guys to see my ugly face the entire time, but I still had it on a split screen and didn't realize that it was videoing that way. I could have gone back and changed it, but I'm not going to. So, hope you enjoyed that. Alright, so here's what we're doing now. We're going ahead and factoring out the common factor out of each one. Okay, so this is the one where we're looking for the common factor, and then we're going to see what we have left. So when I'm looking at my common factors of negative 18, 8, and 2, well, my common factor is going to be 2. V to the third, v squared, and v, that gives me a v. So now the idea is, what do we have left? Well, my GCF is also my divisor, so I have 2v for each one. And we see what we have left. Well, negative 18 divided by 2 is negative 9. V to the third divided by v is just v squared. Now we have 8 divided by 2, which is 4. V squared divided by v is just v. And then last, the same thing divided by the same thing just gives me 1. Let's do that again. What are we factoring out? Well, in this case, we got to be careful because we have a negative for each one of these terms. So we're going to factor out a negative. 12, 30, and 42. My GCF is 6. N squared, n, and no n is no n. So what do we have left? Negative 6. Well, negative 6 or negative 12 divided by negative 6 is 2. N squared. Negative 30 divided by negative 6 is positive 5. N. And then negative 42 divided by negative 6 is positive 7. All right, so let's see what else we got here. Let's look at it with two variables. That one looks kind of easy. Let's do this one right here. So we've got, again, negatives for each one of them. 9, 6, and 12, we have 3. X squared, and x, we just have the x. No y, y squared, no y. So now what do we have? Well, we're going to divide each one of these by that negative 3x. Alright, so negative 9 divided by negative 3 is positive 3. X squared over x just gives me x. Negative 6 divided by negative 3 is positive 2. X squared over x gives me x. Y squared over nothing is just the y squared. It stays there. Negative 12 divided by negative 3 is positive 4. X over x cancels, and I'm left with just the y squared. All right, let's see. All right, so in this case, we've got something that looks similar to what we should be looking for when we get done factoring by grouping. In this case, I have the same thing in the parentheses. So I can pull that out. I'm going to take the x minus 2 out. And I'm left with negative x minus 3. That's what's left in there. Okay. The next one, again, very similar, but I got to be careful because I have an x plus 2 and an x minus 2. Well, because they're different, I can't do anything with it, so this is my answer. So factor each completely. This is factoring by grouping, okay? And we should really change that in the directions so that you're aware to factor by grouping. All right, remember what happens with grouping. We group our first two terms together, and we group our last two terms together. So out of the first two, 48 and 8, we're going to factor out an 8. N to the third and n squared gives me an n squared. Well, what do we have left when we use this as our divisor? 48 divided by 8 gives me a 6. n to the third divided by n squared is just n. Negative 8 divided by 8 is negative 1. N squared divided by n squared cancels. All right, so now we're on to the next one. 18 and 3, we're factoring out a 3. N and no n, well, no n. So what do we have left? Well, we have the 3. All right, so now we're left with negative 6n plus 1. All right, so now we're into that predicament where we've got the same thing in the parentheses, but different signs, right? Positive 6, negative 6, negative 1, positive 1. So we're going to factor out that negative in order to go ahead and change that sign. And so now we've got a negative 18 divided by negative 3 is positive 6. 3 divided by negative 3 is negative 1. Now we can factor out that 6n minus 1 and be left with 8n squared minus 3. All right. Look at one more. So 40 and 16, what's our common factor there going to be? 4. Actually, I'm sorry, 8. N to the third, n squared gives me n squared. So again, let's see what we've got. 40 divided by 8 gives me 5. N to the third over n squared just gives me n. 16 over 8 is 2. N squareds cancel. Look at the next one. Negative and a negative, we factor out a negative. 25 and 10, of course we're factoring out the 5. N and no n, no n. So we have a negative 5. Well, 25 divided, or negative 25 divided by negative 25 gives me 5. N. Negative 10 divided by negative 5 is positive 2. Now we factor out the 5n plus 2. And we're left with 8n squared minus 5. All right, so leading coefficient of 1. Leading coefficient of 1. So we're going to use the x. And we're going to find two numbers that are going to multiply to 2 and add to negative 3. Okay, well, in this case, my multiples of 2 are just 1 and 2. So I know there's going to be a 1 and a 2. But 1 times 2, well, that's 2, but 1 plus 2 is not negative 3. So I make both of them negative. Check it again. Negative 1 times negative 2, positive 2. Negative 1 plus negative 2, negative 3. So when we factor n minus 1, n minus 2. Look at another example. Let's do this one. So again, we're going to use the x. Find two numbers that are going to multiply to negative 27 and add to positive 6. Well, those two numbers, if we look, are going to be 3 and 9. But we got to look here. One of them has to be negative so that when I multiply them, I get a negative 27. So we're going to pick the negative 3 because negative 3 plus 9 gives me a positive 6. So we have x minus 3, x plus 9. Again, same thing. Key is given to you with the sub. Check your answers. Make sure that you have both of these attached to your test to turn in on Friday when you take this test tomorrow. Have a good weekend. See you on Monday.